Hey, what do you say there, people? It's Frank Rizzo. Rizzo. Open your f***ing ears, jackass. You're listening to the Vinyl Guide with Nate. This bastard here, I tell you what. Last week, I broke a record off his fucking head. He was out in space for a week. I asked him, did he remember? He says he didn't remember. So who knows better than Nate? All right, people.
Welcome to the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. It's episode 529 of the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And I just arrived back home. I've been traveling around, went to the U.S., went to Las Vegas, went to Miami, went to L.A., saw a bunch of friends, hung out a bit. Had some sessions at the Punk Rock Museum. Did the SNFU Roundtable. Maybe you guys heard episode 528 with those guys. Had a great time. I mean, fantastic trip. But I came home and I immediately got sick. I'm still struggling a bit at the moment. I'm kind of getting too old to travel at such a pace. But I did it. It's done. And now I'm taking the lessons learned. But I wanted to share this interview. It's a great one. I've always wanted to have Johnny Brennan of the Jerky Boys on the show. I love the Jerky Boys. You guys remember them. Yeah, the phony phone calls, the irate tile man, Frank Rizzo trying to find a job. Those tapes were circulating around my neighborhood in the late 80s and 90s and early 90s, and I know them all by heart, those phone calls. And I was very keen to get the story firsthand, hear Johnny's thoughts, hear those voices again. And man, Johnny is such a funny dude. I hope you all have fun with this one. He's on Family Guy. He does the voice of Mort and a few other characters. And look, if you want to get a cameo from him, you could check out the link in this episode page. It's a great idea to grab one of those as last-minute gifts, especially if you're a slacker like me. You could probably get a few and check off people on your gift list. Anyway, today Johnny talks us through the history of the Jerky Boys, making the recordings, getting hugely popular through the tape trading culture, Howard Stern trying to locate him, them finally signing to Atlantic Records, experiences hanging out with the great Ozzy Osbourne, and much more. And, how funny are these tapes? I still listen to the Jerky Boys and laugh like an idiot. Those tapes are ingrained in my head. All right, without further delay, let's talk to Johnny Brennan about the hilarious history of the Jerky Boys.
Oh, hello.
Hey, how are you, tough guy?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going wonderful. Hey, Johnny, thank you so much for joining us here on the Vinyl Guide. And I got to tell you, with all the history and all the catchphrases, I think my vocabulary is somewhere hovering around 2 to 3% Jerky Boys. Such an influence, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. People have been saying that now for Jesus. It's got to be close to over or through 5 decades. And it's pretty wild to be around so long and have people still really enjoy the different all the different characters and catchphrases and they, it's part of the whole Americana. It's that, people answer the phone. They're like, hey, what's up, Jerky? There's still, even just small little sounds, that pertain to the skits.
Yeah, and just the terminology, sizzle chest, rubberneck, like those sort of things. Did you make up those things like in the moment, or were those things that were kind of part of your earlier life?
Well, most of the stuff was made up like on the spot. Like I always believe like in the spontaneity and the wackiness, and that's always what made the Jerky Boys. That's what separated it from everything else. When I was on Conan O'Brien years ago, I said to him, he said the same thing. He's like, man, I just love how, you hit people with the tough guy and this and that. And I said to him, I said, Frank Rizzo didn't come up with the term tough guy. I said, that goes back as far as the 1920s and 30s with vaudeville. I said, but it's the way Frank Rizzo used to say tough guy. It always sounded like he was out of breath. And I thought people thought that was hilarious, the way Frank would use tough guy. But there's a lot of words that are Jerky Boys completely made up off the cuff, like milky liquor and sizzle chest. skid plate. Now I know skid plate is a thing, but it was actually used, to define somebody, or, what's up there, skid plate? Just, all the wacky, crazy, there's a bunch others, like ass neck, and, they're not coming to mind but there's a whole shit ton of them.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I have no idea what a sizzle chest is, but again, it's part of the vocabulary now.
Right.
So let's kind of go back to the early days. Now, the tapes. Now, I grew up in California, and the tapes got to me before the CDs and I guess the official releases, right? So how did that whole tape system start? Do you know where kind of ground zero was that kind of got those tapes out there?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. What happened was, I was doing these things for my brothers. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and back in the 60s and stuff, and back in those days we were very kind of creative. You know what I'm saying? If you didn't have something to do back in those days, my father would say something like, go outside and find something to do. I'll put a boot in your ass. And that's what, so you always, if you weren't building something or taking something apart, I was always coming up with wacky shit. But I was more involved with physical pranks than I was with, the whole phone call stuff. But it was the characters. I was doing characters on tape back in the 60s, and I was doing sports announcers. Me and a buddy of mine, and to this day, funny enough, I still know the same guy. And I was just making shit up, doing fake sports casting. And at the time, I think I was only 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old. And, so it was always a part of, stuff that, was in my head. And so later on, as I was getting older, I was looking to pick up a pickup truck. And back in those days, we had a thing called the bylines. Do you remember that?
No. What is it, the used paper,
right.
Classified ads?
It wasn't as big as a newspaper. It was like a want ads, but it was small little pamphlet, and it was all like a tiny magazine, and it had all sorts of things. That's why they called it the bylines. They had cars, trucks, they had furniture. So anyway, and I had that in my room because I was looking for a truck, and I had a boom box on this is, you're in the 70s now, and I just said, oh my God, wouldn't it be funny? Because we'd always meet up at my mom's place, upstate New York. And I said, it'd be funny if I, get, some of my characters on tape, fucking around with people, and, just, so that's what I did. I started, just doing these different voices and characters, and all the characters are based on family members or friends. Mm-hmm. So instantly when I picked up the phone, I knew where I was going with this stuff. So, in other words, if I was going to be a pissed off guy, I knew I was going to be doing my dad, and that turned into Frank Rizzo. And the other one where I'm just like, oh, hello. Yes. Hi. And, obviously I said, that's my mom, and so on and so forth. But, so I did all this stuff, and then Kamal would come over back in the early 80s, I believe it was, and he would start listening to these tapes that pretty much I didn't even really remember or think about. And he thought that they were the funniest things that he ever heard, ever. So, and I thought he was being sarcastic, but I said, Jesus, I said, come on, we're just having some fun. And so anyway, he started making copies of the tapes and giving him to his musician buddies. And because Kamal was a great bass guitar player, and he was playing in bands all over New York City, down in the Village and whatnot. So he started handing them out to these other really good musicians. And then they started saying, oh my God, this is the funniest thing ever. And they started making copies, and they started handing them out to other musicians. And that's the underground that really put the Jerky Boys on the map. And then it wasn't long before DJs around the country got a hold of it. And then Howard Stern was looking for this guy. Howard's like, if anybody knows who this Frank Rizzo guy is, you got to call into the studio. And this is around the beginning of Howard's time. So I think this is the early 80s or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly. So Howard was looking for Frank Rizzo. And it wasn't just Howard. It was there was a guy up in Boston. His name was Mark Parento. He was like the Howard Stern of the whole Massachusetts, up in that area. And then it was guys from the West Coast, and that's pretty much how everything hit the scene and became, because don't forget, back in those days we didn't have computers, right. And everything then was done by word of mouth, and people would get my tape and they would make 20, 30, 100 copies, and they'd give it to family members, and the same thing they would say, you're not gonna fucking believe this, you've got to hear this tape. And that was the beginning of the Jerky Boys.
Yeah, wow, because that was a whole tape trading culture back then. That's how we learned about different bands. I think Metallica even credits the tape trading culture for kind of getting them on the map and getting them around the country fairly quick. So Jerky Boys were straight up there. Now, the name Jerky Boys, that wasn't the original name. Was that just kind of picked up because of the Irate Tile Man kicking off?
Yeah, my mom actually came up with the name, the Jerky Boys. It didn't even cross my mind. Back so the record was on the streets, and the record was being sold on a small scale, let's say, really, really tiny scale. So then Atlantic Records, Ahmet Ertegun, the same guy that signed Led Zeppelin, he heard about this crazy cult thing called the Jerky Boys. So they scoffed it up. So it was Atlantic Records. And I believe that was sometime around 91 or 92. And they said, Ertegun, he was like, look, I've never heard anything like this. This is a 1 in a million thing. Let's just get rid of all the names and all the numbers, phone numbers, and any of the dead space. Let's tighten it up. And he said, this is going to be the next big thing. And so now, I believe it was 92 or something, maybe 91. He said now we have an official release on Atlantic Records. Right. Now you're talking. So now it's huge. So now this is the big time. So that's that's when this thing just started, because everyone was so happy now, because they said they had a copy of the cassette tapes, right? And they played their copy so much that they'd have to keep opening the cassette tape and repairing it and putting it back together, because there was no other way to get more of the Jerky Boys tapes unless you met somebody else and you could borrow theirs and copy theirs. But nobody wanted to lend them out. So when the thing finally came out with Atlantic Records onto a CD, everybody was so relieved, because and the thing went gold like in just weeks. It was gold. It stayed on the Billboard Top 100 for, I think, some ridiculous number, like a year or two, maybe 3 years. I don't remember, but I know it was even probably more than that. It broke all statistics for comedy. It was number 1 in Billboard magazine, Heat Seekers. So it broke all kinds of, but when it hit the scene with Atlantic Records, now everybody was like, holy crap, man. It was like the Jerky Boys really arrived,
So prior to that, it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was known as the Subjectivists League. Is that? Oh,
you're talking about the name? No, the name. I'm sorry, I got off track there. The name of the Jerky Boys was it was known. It was circulating. It was New York Times said it was the largest bootleg in history ever, and they even said it was larger than a Grateful Dead bootleg. And because everybody knows the Grateful Dead bootlegs, but that's how they said it was that incredible. And the New York Times. So with it being that, so now we got to come up. They're asking me, Johnny, we're going to have the official release. This is where I lost my train of thought. The official release with Atlantic, we need to have a name for this thing. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, I said, I know on the street people are calling it the Auto Mechanic tapes. People are calling it the Brett Weir tapes. People are calling it the Frank Rizzo tapes. There was a ton of things that people were calling it. And now I'm on the phone in the kitchen, right outside the door by the kitchen, and my mom's washing the dishes. And I'll never, as long as I live, I tell this story 1,000 times. My mom was overhearing the conversation, and she goes, why don't you just call it the fucking Jerky Boys? And the guys on the phone at Atlantic Records, they heard my mom, and they were like, oh my God, that's it. That's it. And I said, I even said, that's awesome. I said, thanks, Mom. I said, that is awesome. And that was how the name came to be, the Jerky Boys. And she goes, well, why wouldn't you just think of that? She goes, ever since you're a kid, she goes, you've been running around the house doing these fucking jerky characters. She goes, it's just a natural, it's a no-brainer. It's the Jerky Boys. And a funny little side note, I was having a problem coming up with the back cover. You know how nice it was when we used to have albums? Mm-hmm. I was having a hard time coming up with the back cover to Jerky Boys 3 because everything was done. It's probably my favorite Jerky Boys record. So proud of it. Had the cover done. Everything else was done. The thing was edited, finished, mastered, and I didn't have anything for the back cover. So I went over to my mom's house, not far from where I am right now. And I said, Mom, I had a cup of coffee with my mom. I said, I can't think of something, just an idea for the back cover of the Jerky Boys, the new record, number 3. And she goes, she didn't even think about it. She goes, without skipping a beat, she goes, why don't you just have Frank Rizzo sitting at a kitchen table, and from his point of view, looking down at the want ads, like what we were just talking about, the bylines. She said, looking down at the paper with a pencil in his hand, sitting at the table. And again, I was like, oh my God, that's fucking brilliant. So Sean Taggart, the artist, he said, Johnny, tell your mom that's Aces. He drew it all up, and that became the cover, the back cover for Jerky Boys 3. And I also credited my mom in the record for coming up with the back cover. So it was funny how she was very instrumental, maybe sentimental even, about, the whole growing up thing, and just, knowing that, I was a half of a fucking pancake,
Well, she seems to have had maybe an untapped talent for marketing.
Yeah. That's back in those days in the 60s and the late 50s. Moms were, it was funny, but it's true. She always came up with great ideas. Just fantastic ideas. So yeah, she came up with the Jerky Boys.
So you have these tapes, and they're raw, and they're circulating. You got people's phone numbers on there. You got maybe even the names of their businesses on the original edits. Once you get you need to go legit. You need to kind of clean those up, right? Now, taking out the phone numbers is probably pretty straightforward, but did you have to go get clearances, go get releases, find those people that were on the other end of the phone and get their permission?
Well, yes. And that also goes along with the whole thing I told you with Atlantic Records. So that was the first thing that, that Erdogan and these people at Atlantic, they were trying to figure out. Can we get in touch with any of these people? And I was very open and truthful. I said, there's no way. I said, this was done as a fluke deal for me and my brothers, to play on the weekend, upstate New York. I said, there's no way. I wouldn't even know where to begin. And now, obviously, there was some names or things like that. But Erdogan just thought it would just be easier just to take out any businesses, any phone numbers, and he said, and then we'll deal with the consequences, because he felt that what he had there was gold. And Atlantic Records would have never signed it if they didn't think this was. They thought it was earth-shaking stuff. They knew that this was something that they have never seen, which I thought was amazing to have that kind of foresight, that kind of vision, but they did, and the rest is history. When I came out with Jerky Boys 2, it was gold in like 6 days. It went gold.
Yeah.
Sold like 800,000 units in like 6 days.
Yeah, and those moments can't be recreated either. I'm sure there was probably some sort of discussion like, oh, can we just kind of fake it? And it's like, no. You can't get those reactions again.
No.
That is lightning in a bottle.
That's lightning in a bottle. And people have said that a million times, that exact term, lightning in a bottle. When I had a gig with Anheuser-Busch beer, and this one of the stipulations in the contract is that everything had to be exactly as the Jerky Boys was. No bullshit, nothing phony, nothing written as scripted. Everything, if I was going to do jobs for them, it all had to be 100% exactly the way I did the calls for the albums.
Did you ever hear back from anyone after the Jerky Boys got popular?
Only one person. And they came, as soon as Atlantic put this stuff out, it was the piano tuner guy. I'm sure you know that skit. Mm-hmm. Eric the Butt Nut. There's another one. That's another term. As soon as the guy got on the phone, he goes, "This is me." I instantly said, I don't have any idea why I did it. I said, "Yeah, the butt nut. What's going on?" And so, but yeah, that guy came forward and he said that's me. But again, you have to prove it. So Atlantic paid him like $200 and he went away.
Okay. All right.
And that was the end of it.
And so the album came out, the official album came out on Select in 93. But you're saying these phone calls were made even like maybe a decade earlier? Is that?
Oh yeah, they were around, there was more calls that I had to do because now I have a record deal, but the bootleg was around, you're talking 70s.
70s? You're
talking 70s. And I was doing these voices and taping this stuff back in the 60s. So you're talking, this stuff's been around, but it wasn't until I think I was a freshman or a sophomore in high school that I actually started taping it with my buddy to get it on tape where we could play it up at the house on the weekends. So you're talking literally 50 years ago.
So when you had all those tapes, the first version of that was pulled together by you and Kamal is probably like 20, 25 phone calls, but you had a whole you must have had a catalog of 100 or more. Is that fair?
Yeah, there was, but I would say there was probably about 60 or 70. And because everything I would use on the next 2 albums. So Jerky Boys 1, all of the stuff that was on Jerky Boys 1 came off the bootlegs. Oh, okay. So the bootlegs are what was floating around since the 70s and into the 80s. And like I said, that's the stuff that Howard Stern was listening to for years. And not just Howard, but like I said, all these DJs. So you're talking a long, long time ago. But people, what's strange is they don't really count anything until Walt Disney Pictures came in and wanted to make a movie. So when they did that, now you're talking 1993, 94. So that's when everybody started to kind of say, "Oh, I've been listening to the Jerky Boys since 1995. Well, 1995 is when the movie came out. Mm-hmm. The Jerky Boys was around almost 20 years before that. So, it was a process, but the bootleg is over here. And then everything else started to have its legs, let's say, in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, mass market. But do you still have those original tapes, those original cassettes that you made in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, I actually do have a lot of stuff, but there's nothing that was ever really usable. People have photographed it and they've taken pictures of it and things like that. But there was nothing that was like a continuous flow of a Jerky Boys style. Because once they came out with Jerky Boys 1, I chose like the best tracks off of the bootleg, like the Auto Mechanic or Brett Weir or Sol's Eyeglasses. So once I did that, now I'm being marketed by Atlantic. So I wanted to keep like a running theme of like where it was all uniform. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's what I did.
So after the popularity, after it kind of hit the masses, you keep doing phone calls. I'm sure you must have been recognized in phone calls after that?
That didn't start coming until Jerky Boys 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jerky Boys 3. So at around the end of Jerky Boys 2, Jerky Boys 2 was gigantic. That was gigantic. I was nominated for a Grammy on that one. That was probably, as far as popularity is concerned, that was probably my biggest record ever.
Right. So you start making these phone calls. The Jerky Boys get popular. You said around Jerky Boys 3, you start making phone calls, and then people are starting to recognize you. Like, oh, is this the Jerky Boys guy, or is this the Frank Rizzo? Are you getting kind of that on the phone calls?
Right. A lot of time what I got was somebody would say, like if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing a Frank Rizzo or a Saul Rosenberg, because you have to remember now that Jerky Boys 2 was gigantic. Mm-hmm. So everybody now, by this time that Jerky Boys 2 was released, the Jerky Boys, it was a household name. So by the time I was doing 3, I'm trying to put calls together and, making some new ones to go along with some old ones from the bootleg. And this is 3. And I remember doing some spots and some calls, and I would get some of the people, some of the time, very rare, but every now and then, what do you think, you're the Jerky Boys? Oh, what do you think, you're Frank Rizzo? Hey, I got a tough guy on the line. He thinks he's Frank Rizzo. And once stuff like that happened, like, the Jerky Boys is about spontaneity, and it's about shocking people. And then sometimes, with these people, they would start to kind of joke back with me because they thought it was their cousin, or they thought it might be their Uncle Bob. Oh, yeah, he's on the phone. He thinks he's Frank Rizzo. And they'd be like, what are you doing over there, tough guy? And they're trying to be funny. So I would instantly dump out of the call and hang it up. Mm-hmm. Because the Jerky Boys has to be, like I said, that uniformity where it's got to be, one of my characters calls. And that's why if you see on Jerky Boys 3, because every year they would ask me, well, how are you going to top the album that you did last year? And I for Jerky Boys 3, I was like, oh my God, how do I even think of topping number 2? Because it was such a huge success. And so I came up with the idea of having prank phone calls coming in. So I would put ads in the newspapers, for this, that, or the other thing, and people would call in. And I was in one of the ads, I was selling lawn and garden equipment. In another ad, I was selling Civil War memorabilia. And I got some of the funniest fucking calls you ever saw. And Jerky Boys 3, it was one of my favorite records, because probably, like I said, it is definitely my favorite record because of the amount of work that went into it. In other words, it wasn't just sitting down and saying, all right, let's do about, 15 new calls that we can mix in together with some of the older calls, like I did for number 2. I really had to sit down and say, what am I going to do for the fans that's going to be completely kind of shocking that they're not used to? And that's when I came up with the incoming calls, and I also did 5 brand new characters that the fans never heard before. And so Jerky Boys 3 was a tremendous success.
So you would just tape it just on a boombox. What was the equipment that you used to be able to tape those calls?
It was a boombox. I don't even remember the brand name, but I have it. I could send you a picture of it. I still have the boombox. I still have the phone. And it wasn't through the wires. So when people hear that, they're fascinated. So I would lay on the rug on my stomach, and the boombox would be in front of me, mm-hmm. and there would be a speakerphone on the floor on the rug next to the boombox, and that was it. So when it was time to record, I'd be on the speakerphone, and then you would just hit play and record on the boombox, and everything was done in the open air.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess that's why on a few of the calls we hear some background noise and a little bit of communication. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So early on, once you started kind of getting the tapes are around, Howard Stern's talking about you, you're still anonymous. You're trying to figure out, I guess, how you could turn this into a bit of a business. Yeah. Like how, was that kind of
the funny thing, my thinking was always I was just going along for the ride, because you have to remember, I was in the construction business. I was a scaffold worker, and to me, this was all very foreign to me. This whole thing about this being famous and being in the public eye, because I know it sounds weird, but especially now, but when I first hit the scene, I was a very shy person.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very naturally very shy, and I never wanted to be in the public eye. I couldn't stand up in class when I was a kid and tell stories and do things like that because I was so I sometimes it would literally cripple me with fear because I had the phobia of being up in front of people and speaking and all that shit. So when I had the deal come through with Atlantic Records, I tried to explain to people. I'll never forget walking into the boardroom, and they were all sitting around this giant table, massive table. And as soon as I walked in the room, the first thing I said to everybody, and I was very serious about it because I was very scared. Scared may not be a good word to use, but I was apprehensive. And I said to them, I said, look, guys, I just want to get this off my chest. Just so you guys know, I said, I'm not a fucking comedian. And the whole place erupted with laughter, and they laughing at me and pointing at me and laughing. And the assholes thought I was making a joke.
Okay.
Because at the time, the Jerky Boys was considered probably the funniest thing on earth. And so they're all like looking at me like I'm an asshole, laughing at me. And I said, guys, I'm fucking serious. Because in my mind, what I thought they wanted to do with me was package me up and put me out on the road and get me to sell this thing. And I'm going to have to go out in front of large audiences. So I was already kind of trying to mold things so that I wouldn't have to do that stuff. So that's kind of where I came from. So I wasn't thinking about anything and it was unfortunate in a way because I didn't realize just how lucrative what I created was.
Yeah, and I guess you sitting in your house, you're doing construction. What was it? Scaffolding? And
yes,
and
yes.
Your tapes are popular all over the world. You're getting
all over the world. Yeah.
People are trying to find who this Frank Rizzo guy is, and
right.
You're just like, well, shit. How come everyone else is getting a piece of this but me?
Exactly, and that's what was going on. So then I started to get wise to myself. But by that time, it was a little late because contracts had already been signed, and I got into this thing as a lark. Because when people were telling me, Johnny, you have no idea. You created something that you're talking about celebrities and auto racing celebrities and football celebrities and baseball celebrities. These people love you, man. They think what you did is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it wasn't catching on to me that what I created was this monstrous thing. And then it was nominated for Grammy Awards and all this other shit. And that's when I started to say, wow, so it's like Madonna wrote a book about it. John Bon Jovi wrote a book about it. How does it go? If I only know now or if I only knew then what I know now.
Right. Of course.
And it's getting into that business. I didn't have any fucking clue that it would make tens of millions of dollars, if not more than that. Movies for Walt Disney Pictures. I had no idea. To me, I'm a construction guy. I'm thinking, so I'm just thinking, hey, this kind of cool, man. People, they get a kick out of it. Don't get me wrong. When I was a little kid all through school, I was always voted the funniest kid in the class and all shit like that. But it was because of stupid shit I was doing. I wasn't, like I said, I couldn't stand up in front of the class and tell jokes. So I would have a group of girls that used to sit in my little group, and I would slap the shit out of myself in front of them, and they thought that was the most hilarious thing they ever saw. So that's the kind of shit that I was always known for doing, more visual pranks than like being in front of large groups and telling jokes and things.
Right. So when the phone calls started coming in, and like you said, Amit Erdogan's on the phone. There's probably 50 other people that were chasing you at the same time. How did you navigate that? Did you have a manager at that point, or were it all coming to you directly?
No manager. That's why I wish it was, instead of just 50 people chasing me, it was 50 really, really awesome, good-hearted people. Mm-hmm. But in that business, that's not the case ever.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
And this was such fire. This was viral before we knew what viral was. This
Yes,
is
yes.
Borat, really, before Borat, right?
Borat was years and years after
I know.
Jerky Boys.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a template for it because it requires someone.
Well, that guy
being surprised.
Borat is a huge Jerky Boys fan. And if you listen closely, there's the famous Curly G. That's a Jerky Boys character, Curly G. And that character goes back, many decades. And so, when, Borat grew up listening to the Jerky Boys, Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, grew up listening to the Jerky Boys. Adam Sandler just put me in a show. Now I'm part of his live show, and he pays homage to the Jerky Boys that, he thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, a lot of these big time, celebrities, they kind of, look today, even today, that Bill Burr, he's a huge Jerky Boys, Frank Rizzo fan, but all of these guys, though, they openly admitted that the Jerky Boys was, their biggest part of their comic, lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Now, you still making phone calls?
No.
Lost the spark?
I don't do. What's that?
Yeah, you lost the spark for it?
No. They asked me to do an album, they asked me 25 years to do a record. So I finally relented about, even McFarlane, Seth was saying, Johnny, you got to do a new record. So about 25 years went by, and I think it was like 2021 or so, I came out with a brand new Jerky Boys record, and it was the first brand new Jerky Boys record in almost 25 years. And it went straight to number one. It went number one on Apple, iTunes, whatever the hell you call it, Amazon Music. It was number one everywhere. So, and you're talking, that's almost 25 years between actual Jerky Boys traditional style record. So, I could sit down right now and do phone calls, but that's not what if I have to, I'll do it, but that's not even, I don't, even when I was doing it, that wasn't my cup of tea. You know what I'm saying? Like when I was doing the original tapes, the bootleg tapes, I didn't sit there going, man, I'm going to make some awesome fucking prank phone calls today. That's not what I did. I just saw it as a medium for me to fuck around with these characters and, kid around so my brothers and I could listen to it on the weekend. And the funny thing is, even then I wouldn't listen to it because I don't know if you ever felt this way, but sometimes you feel really wacky about listening to your own voice.
Yeah. It's a bit odd.
So even I'd make the tapes and everybody else would listen to them. But you're going back a long, long ways there,
I remember just, being a kid and teenager and making prank phone calls just to make my friends laugh. It was just a couple of us, but you were doing it even just for yourself, just to exercise these characters. Yeah. Yeah,
basically that's, and again, like I said, we would all meet up at my mom's place on the weekend. So, as we were getting older, growing up, I should say, and, so we would all meet up there and it was like the meeting place for the whole family. So for the weekend, we'd get together, we'd eat and we'd have fun and we'd play football games, we'd race cars and, so it was always just like the icing on the cake to have some good, laughter and shit, we were doing and, but that's about, it was just more or less as a good fun kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was never meant to get out to the public. I believe, I still said this, I said this over the years to all the big celebrities. I still believe that's one of the reasons why it did become so famous, is because I never meant to be famous, and I never meant for these tapes to get out to the public. I was just doing this fun, goofy thing with my characters to have my brothers and my father have a good laugh at the house. That's it. And when Kamal made the tapes and all the musicians started making tapes, it got out to the public. And sometimes you believe in there's, sometimes a happy miracle, things happen for a reason,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, if you do good work, then, you can potentially get recognized and reap the
Right.
the rewards and the joy that you have.
Well, I'll tell you what when you look back on it now, so everybody wishes you can go back and right some of the wrongs, and put yourself in the catbird seat where, all the money that I was making should have come to me because it was my invention. I created the Jerky Boys, and you know what it cost for me to make the Jerky Boys? 50 cents for a cassette tape. And the record company would take that 50-cent cassette tape with all my material on it and sell it to kids for $21 or whatever they were selling it for back in those days. And then the record companies got pissed off at the kids for wanting to steal everything.
Well, they were too busy stealing everything. They didn't want anyone hoarding it on their actions.
Right. The record companies were stealing everything they could get their fucking hands on, and then stole my tapes for 50 cents, and then went out and tried to sell a 50-cent tape, well, just because it had Johnny Brennan and the Jerky Boys and the material, and they would mark it up, to $21, I think, in most places, and come on, man, and that's the shit that would piss me off.
Well, we had Tommy Chong on the show one time, and he explained something that I'd never really thought about. It's very inexpensive to record comedy. You don't have that huge upfront cost where you do with like a band. So record companies are laughing, and especially something like the Jerky Boys, it sold millions and millions. Oh my God, they couldn't believe their luck.
That's right. And that's why I wish hindsight, I just wish, but to get back to what I was saying, I always wish hindsight was 20, but it's not. So anyway, but what does pay off for me is over the years, I've gotten hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of emails saying to me that you don't know what you did for my brother, or you don't know what you did for my mom. She was dying of a brain tumor, or you don't know what you have no idea. You have helped me through some of the darkest times, Johnny. I don't know how to thank you for that. And trust me, that means more to me than fucking anything. And that's a big deal. And so now I do these cameos. I don't know if you're familiar with cameos, but are you guys in Australia? I'm sure they have.
Yeah, you could do Cameo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do these cameos where people order cameos from me, and they pick the characters they want me to do. And it's like a big shout out to my brother. And you know why? Because they grew up with my stuff. Some of these guys that are ordering my cameos, it's their 40th birthday, and they literally grew up with my material since they're children. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So it's a big, big deal. And that's a really cool thing.
So where can people order that? They just go to Cameo.
Cameo.com/Johnny Brennan.
Got it. And then they can get any of your characters, Saul Rosenberg.
Whatever they want. Everything on Cameo is kind of cool because it's self-explanatory. It'll ask them what they want. It'll have instructions for Johnny Brennan. Like, it's my brother Mike's birthday. He loves Frank Rizzo. Tell Mike to go fuck himself. Whatever they want me to do. Like, it could be Saul Rosenberg. It could be, I do Family Guy. So it could be something from, my Family Guy characters,
That's fantastic. No, Family Guy, you do Mort.
I do Mort Goldman. I do a lot of the gay characters, but I used to do the bartender until he got killed. So I did the bartender for I don't know, I think I must have done him for almost 20 years. And Mort Goldman, I've been on with Mort Goldman for almost 21 years now.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And I do a lot of the other, like if they need something like a gay cow or I've done Fresca or Zima bottles, anything off the beaten path that's a wacky kind of thing. I kind of do that.
You just got a little recording area in your house. They call you up. They say, here's what you say.
Yeah, I do. Or there's a recording studio. I leave my driveway and it's about 30 seconds down the road. West by West Sound. They're a tremendous recording facility that they've done hundreds over the years, hundreds of hardcore bands. So they're from New York as well, but they moved upstate, and not funny enough, they're only about 30 seconds down the road from me.
So you into hardcore music? What do you listen to these days, Johnny?
Me, I'm a Zeppelin, the Who. I'm a guy from the 60s. I love all kinds of music. I really do, because I'm a musician. So I play guitar, I play drums, but I listen to everything. But my core stuff is, like I said, Zeppelin, stuff, Deep Purple, stuff from that era.
Right.
Some of the 80s bands were pretty terrific. Musician wise, they were fantastic. There's a lot of great stuff out there. And thank God I'm seeing a lot of the kids playing their instruments again today, which is fantastic.
I know there was a vinyl record reissue of the first Jerky Boys a couple years ago. Are you still involved in that at all, or is that?
I wish I was, man. If I was, I'd have copies of all my records in vinyl.
Got it. Okay.
I would love that.
So you had some time with the great Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes.
With his passing, he's in the movie, the Jerky Boys movie. What are some of your memories of Ozzy?
We had such a great time. Such a great time. Ozzy, I always tell the story when I was in my honey wagon. That's these little rooms that they let you sleep in while you're getting ready to shoot and stuff. And it was like, I don't know, must have been about 6 a.m. And they must have just brought Ozzy in, and I didn't know it. And I was sleeping off. I tied one on the night before. We were all partying, and so I'm sleeping in my little honey wagon room, and I hear all kinds of talking and laughter on the steps of my little honey wagon, and I'm kind of getting pissed off because I need a little sleep. And I think it was like I said, 6 a.m, and I go over nice and quietly to open the louvers of the door. I'm like, who the fuck is out here yapping away? And I open the louvers, and less than a foot away from my hand is Ozzy Osbourne. And I was like, holy shit, it's fucking Ozzy. Because I knew he was coming on set, but I didn't realize he was going to be standing outside my fucking door talking to my wife, and they're all outside yucking it up. So I threw cold water on my face, and I turned around. I went back out the door, and Ozzy's like, there he is. And we, from that minute on, we just hit it off. Like, we would ride back and forth together in the limo, me and Ozzy. And so we had so many stories to tell each other. And Ozzy's just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Anybody who ever got a chance to spend time with Ozzy, and just, he's the farthest thing. His whole shtick was the Prince of Darkness. Mm-hmm. But Ozzy couldn't have been farther. If you got a chance to know him, Ozzy was one of the warmest, kindest, funniest, naturally funniest people I ever met.
I've heard that impression from so many people. And this isn't just because he passed. Everyone's being nice. Everyone said he's genuinely one of the best blokes.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I can tell you, I spent a week with him. He was truly one of the good guys. And in this business, you don't see any of those. But he was truly one of the good guys. And the stories we would we had each other rolling. But he was just a genuine, wonderful guy. Wonderful guy.
So what do you know about Johnny B, Traveling Piano Man?
I don't know.
No? Okay. There's a couple of records, Johnny B, Traveling Piano Man, that appear to be credited to you. Must have been
really?
Different Johnny Brennan.
I don't know. I mean, is it a comedy thing?
No, I don't know. It's just these records from the U.S. that I guess there's another Johnny Brennan that seemed to be credited. So sometimes they get the wires screwed up.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing that you got to be careful about, because when I was known all over the place as Johnny B, and then they told me when I became famous that I wasn't allowed to use it. That's my name. And they told me I wasn't allowed to use it. So I had to just go and I had to start using Johnny Brennan, my full name. Because there was some guy up in Canada that I think he was doing children's books or something like that. And his name, he was using Johnny B.
You know what? I'll send you the link and you can see if that's the guy, because that's Johnny B. That was his name.
Yeah.
Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the show. And it's an absolute pleasure. You're such a hero to me. I mean, look, every industry has their legends. Basketball's got Michael Jordan, golf's got Tiger Woods. When it comes to prank phone calls, it's Johnny Brennan. So absolute honor to have you on the show, man. Everyone go to Johnny's Cameo account. I'll put links in this episode page. Order some shit for your loved ones. They'll absolutely die laughing.
Before I go,
yeah,
I just want to say a huge shout out to all my fans all over the world. I want to say a big shout out, especially to my fans in Australia. They've been there since the very beginning. You're talking 40 years ago. So I want to just give a big shout out to all the Jerky Boys diehards, and I really appreciate them.
You know, not that many people leave a dent in this universe, but I firmly believe you have. You've brought that to so many people, and I think on my dying bed, I will hear the Jerky Boys and be laughing, and that's a great ending.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I hope you liked that interview there, tough guy. Yeah. You know, one of the proudest moments of being a father was when my kids got old enough that I could introduce them to the Jerky Boys, and I probably went a little bit too early with that. But anyway, they've since caught up, and we enjoy them together. Again, Johnny does cameos. Grab one from him. Those are hilarious. Make great last-minute gifts. And anyway, viva le Jerky Boys. I'm glad they have that place in history and my heart. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate everyone who's leaving positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those of you who are sharing these episodes on social media, that's appreciated. Especially you absolute dead set legends who are supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. That is very much appreciated, and we'll be back shortly with another episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves, and thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.